Thank you for checking out Real Talk Personal Finance. Shit's about to get real. Cashflow King with you today. And today we have Cashflow King Goes Car Shopping. As always, before we get into the show, just a few quick announcements. First, apologies if I sound a little under the weather. I feel fine, but I've had some runny nose. I don't know if it's allergies. I don't know if I'm getting sick. Hopefully not. So if my voice sounds a little bit off today, that's why. But hopefully it sounds all right to you guys. First announcement. I would like to congratulate the Q1 2025 $25 e-gift card giveaway winner. This person will be getting a $25 Amazon e-gift card emailed. Congratulations to Brandon A. Brandon, congratulations on the gift card win. In full disclosure, I always put our names on the wheel just for shits and grins. Maybe I should take them off, but I had myself and Cube Crusher on the wheel of names, and it actually landed on Cube Crusher first, and I told him, hey, we're not eligible. I'm going to spin this thing again. And so Brandon A was the winner. I meant to do that out in Vegas when I was visiting Cube, but unfortunately I forgot to do that, so I did that here probably about a week and a half or so ago when I got home. And that's what we have. So for anyone that's new to the show or not familiar, we do a quarterly e-gift card giveaway. At the end of every quarter, we give away a $25 gift card to one lucky premium subscriber. And then also, I think last year at the end of 2024, I think I ended up giving away 4 $25 gift cards leading up to the new year. So every now and then we change it up a little bit. It's just our way of giving back and showing appreciation for our premium subscribers. And I think Andre T, normally you don't get a shout out on the way out. We don't have very many people that subscribe and unsubscribe, but Andre T joined us, I want to say it could have been the end of last year or possibly early this year. I'd have to go back and look, but I know when we were doing the $25 weekly giveaways, I think at the end of 2024, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he joined for that. It was trying to get lucky or something real quick and then just decided he didn't want to be premium subscriber anymore. I'm not sure, but Andre T, buddy, we're sorry to lose you as a premium subscriber. Hopefully you'll reconsider, but for now, all the best to you. Okay, the next announcement is I just wanted to recognize, because it's been a while, the top 5 countries listening to the Real Talk Personal Finance podcast of all time. So it's been a while since I've gone through and actually taken a look at this. We're up to 76 total countries. I've stopped naming the new ones. If the rankings towards the top change, we'll be sure to periodically recognize those additional countries. Number 1, as you might expect, because we are a U.S.-based show, is the United States of America. Number 2 is Australia. Number 3 is Zambia. Number 4, France. And number 5, Canada. So thank you to everybody in those countries listening to the Real Talk Personal Finance podcast. We really appreciate it. All right, so without further ado, I thought that I would do a show on my recent experience car shopping and talk a little bit about that. I wasn't really sure what to title the show. I was going to put something about salespeople or sales, but I mean, basically it's regarding the car buying process and my experience with that recently, which was interesting. And we'll get into that in a little more detail here in right now. So, I know what I was going to say. I've gotten some feedback. I had a rant on, I think the title of the episode was Healthcare is a Fucking Joke, and I wasn't sure really whether or not to put that out because it was kind of more of a rant. And I don't expect this to be a rant. It's just going to be me talking about my experience. But I got some feedback after putting that show out that people really liked it, sort of keep them coming. And so maybe it wasn't all that irrelevant to personal finance in general because we all have our experiences in life with different things. So what better topic, coincidentally, to fall into play shortly thereafter, such as car buying, right? Everybody at some point is going to have to get a vehicle, whether that's a new vehicle or a used vehicle. And I don't claim to be a car buying expert by any means, but I do have, fortunately or unfortunately, a habit of watching different things on YouTube, and that's where I get my entertainment sometimes. That's how I wind down and decompress sort of at the end of the day, especially just laying in bed watching some different channels. And for whatever reason, I've always been somewhat intrigued and interested with car sales. For anyone that is, unfamiliar, I'm sure if you went on YouTube and typed in, different people, you'd see different things. But I always thought it was interesting because there's a lot of people that, quite frankly, car salespeople that just flat out suck, right? They're just terrible at their job. They probably won't last very long because it is a commission-based job typically. But then there's people that are really good at what they do. And there's one guy out there who, quite frankly, I have mixed feelings about personally, but his name's Andy Elliott. So anyone that wants to watch some car sales training on how to be super aggressive and, really go after it, this guy, Andy Elliott, wears, shorts that are probably 3 sizes too small to show off his legs. He's super jacked. He's really high energy. Interesting and entertaining person to watch for sure. Not sure that I would necessarily emulate his practices, but there's people like him. There's this other guy out there, I forget his last name. His first name's Tommy, and he does a lot of videos on, people hire him, and quite frankly, I consider doing this as a service. I think he charges like $1,000, and people will hire him to essentially negotiate with dealerships on their behalf so they know what vehicle they want. They get in touch with him and his team. They pay him $1,000. He pretty much, sources the car for them, calls dealerships all over the place, negotiates with them, and then pretty much just, once the deal is essentially done, transitions it off to the client to ink the deal, and that's that. He claims, though, that his service is, and it is more of a convenience type thing. It's not necessarily always going to be about getting the lowest price or saving the most amount of money, but sometimes just taking the headache out of the entire process. So I did consider, hey, next time I need a vehicle, I might use him or a service like him, to do that on my behalf, to not have to deal with it. But even though I work in financial services, I would consider what we do in a way sort of consultative sales. And at the end of the day, whether that's a client that's, hiring you to go into some sort of a fee-based or managed account, or it's a transaction where you're paid a commission, or whatever the case might be, it's still sort of a sales type of role. It's not your cut and dry, super aggressive, like whatever with car sales, or even in some cases retail real estate sales. It's quite a bit different than that, and there's a lot more licensing and regulatory requirements and all that kind of stuff. People have different opinions about car salespeople. And, I always thought to myself, if I wasn't in financial services, and I didn't have a conscience, maybe I could sell cars. No disrespect to anybody out there who sells cars for a living. I'm sure there are a lot of people that do it the right way, which we're actually going to talk about here on today's show, because I think, at least in my personal experience, which is obviously a very small sample size, my experience when I was younger was very different than my experience here recently. And it's interesting as to why that might be, and I can kind of speculate and opine on that here a little bit. But maybe things are starting to change or have changed, and in other cases, maybe not so much. And this will make more sense the further along we get into the episode. So way back in the day, I remember when I was in college, a buddy of mine, Matt, was looking for a new vehicle. I think a new used vehicle, but a new to him vehicle. He was looking, I believe it was a Mazda. I know it was a Mazda. I don't remember if it was an RX-8 or something. It was a sportier version. It wasn't an SUV. I can't remember if it was a sedan or a coupe. But we went to this dealership, and they started with the typical, do you have a trade? Are you going to pay cash or finance? Are we buying today? Questions that seemingly harmless on the front end, but, they're trying to get as much information ultimately to use against you on the back end. And I got pissed off at the time. I don't know where or how I learned about car shopping at the time, but I remember we got chased off that lot because I looked at the guy. I said, look, those questions are irrelevant. Let the kid drive the car. Talking about my buddy Matt. And they didn't really like that too much. We ended up driving the car, and the sales rep was okay, but by the time the sales manager came out and started pulling all his bullshit, they ended up literally chasing us off the lot. I was kind of an asshole, had a chip on my shoulder. Some people would tell you that I still do. I don't know. I don't think I do. But, it was one of those things where I wasn't going to take shit from anybody, and I wasn't going to have them take advantage of my buddy just because we're two young college kids. And, and sometimes salespeople were assholes. I remember one time, and this was, I think, right when I had graduated undergrad, I went to go buy a vehicle at the time, and we were negotiating on the price, and, the sales manager was kind of an asshole, and he said something like, well, if it's too much car for you, trying to, assert himself, being all big and bad and want me to step up and, Oh, all right, fine, I'll pay your price type of thing. So everybody has their own tactics and techniques when it comes to this stuff. And, I feel like, at least in my experience, and I don't know if it was a function of the fact that I was younger and obviously looked younger, where people seem to be more brash and aggressive, or if it was the area of the country that I lived in at the time versus where I am now, or what. And it could be a combination of things, but I felt like the sales process this time around was quite a bit better. And so I had been looking at vehicles for a while. My car was quite old, and it had some issues, for the past several years, but nothing that was an absolute deal breaker. It still functioned reasonably well, so I kept it. And then recently, without getting into too much detail, there were some issues with the transmission, and I took it to an independent repair shop that I've used for years. They gave me some quotes on what it was going to take to fix it. And to fix the transmission issue, plus there were a couple other things going on, all in would have been probably equivalent to the value of the vehicle at that time anyway. So even if I were to fix everything, I'm going to spend as much as the car is worth. And obviously, there comes a point where you got to cut it loose and let it go. And that's what I decided to do. So, it is what it is. It was time to move on, and, kind of a sad day. But I knew that day was coming. And so I started researching probably, I would say, for maybe the past year or so, maybe even longer, just trying to keep my finger on the pulse of the market. What's out there? What's pricing look like? How long are these cars sitting? What are they going for, type of thing. But I didn't really, I wasn't out there test driving and stuff because I wasn't ready to buy right then and there. It was more so just some preliminary research in preparation for what I knew was coming. And so the day that I dropped it off, all in, it probably took me, I'd say, about 3 days total, 2.5 to 3 days from start to finish. I had narrowed things down in terms of what I wanted, and pretty much blocked out a few days of my schedule and was, just hammering away at it. But in that process, I visited different dealerships, dealt with different salespeople, drove different brands of vehicles, and overall, like I said, I think I had a much better experience than most people say that they have, and certainly a better experience than I had previously buying or going with my friend to buy, his vehicle, and then when I was buying my vehicle coming out of school, which was a big fucking mistake, by the way, but that's another story. It ended up turning out all right, but bought a brand new car straight out of college that was probably a little too much car for me, as the sales manager liked to say. I didn't end up buying from him, by the way. I went elsewhere and got a better deal, but still, probably shouldn't have done that. But anyway, so it's been an interesting process. So the first day, I take my existing car, to the repair shop, drop it off there, get a lift to the dealership, and this is a fun side note. I was having one of my requirements. I know this sounds absolutely ridiculous. Cube Crusher will love this one. As you guys know, if you listen to the Zoltar episode, which, by the way, we did release 2 or 3 episodes within a day or so of each other, I think. So for those that are premium, you probably had 2 or 3 episodes that came out within the period of a day or two. For those that aren't premium, it still could have happened where one might have overrode the other one. So let's say, for example, you had one that downloaded to your phone, you didn't have a chance to listen to it, and then the next day we released another one. Well, now the new one is going to show on your phone. The old one may not show there. So if you've missed an episode, you may want to go back and check those out. And let me see if I can look real quick. So we have, back in mid-February, looking at another car wash syndication investment in 2025. That is a premium episode. Then there was Zoltar, regular episode on March 7th. Then we did the Q4 2024 e-newsletter discussion. That was a premium episode, also released, it looks like, on March 7th. And then this one I'm probably going to release today or tomorrow. I'm recording this on Sunday, March 16th. So anyway, just if you missed anything, check it out. The Zoltar one is pretty funny. Cube Crusher shit on me a little bit in that episode. I didn't realize my mom listened to it, so all of a sudden I got an earful from her, but she seemed to enjoy the show. Anyway, kind of funny stuff. But going back to today's show. So I decided to add a stop to the Lyft ride and was trying to go to Dunkin' Donuts, and the app wasn't working, and the driver was cool, and she's like, hey, no problem, it's right there, we'll go ahead and stop. And one of my things was, I'm going to get a fucking large Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee and make sure this bitch fits in the cup holder. That's one of my requirements, and I can still touch and access the buttons or whatever's going on in the front console there. If I have a big drink and it fits well and all that kind of stuff. I accidentally ordered 2 iced coffees, right? And I bought her breakfast, so I got her, I think they're doing the $6 meal deal still, so I got her, something. So I show up to the dealership, I have 2 large iced coffees in a cup carrying tray, right? And I thought this was kind of funny. This was not my plan initially, but I was like, I'm going to have some fun with this. So I fucking walk in there, go to the front desk, they're kind of looking at me, the receptionist lady's looking at me kind of funny. And, I was like, which one of your salespeople likes iced coffee? And I'm sure they've never had anybody come in and like, she's kind of looking at me like, what is this guy trying to do, So anyway, it ended up going to the sales manager who I started talking to, and then once he found out what I wanted and pulled a car around for me, we talked for a little bit. He got one of his sales guys to come out and do the test drive with me and that sort of thing. So that was kind of interesting. So the first guy, I won't use anybody's last name, but the first guy at the first dealership, his first name was Brian. Brian was a younger dude, started off very respectful, and Mr. Cashflow King type of thing and whatnot. This was a luxury dealership, and we test drove 3 different vehicles. Nice guy, but it was funny because he asked me about if I had a trade or whatever, and normally I wouldn't answer those questions. Normally I'd say, look, I'm here to talk about this particular vehicle. We're going to negotiate on this vehicle. If somebody tries to fucking foursquare me or something, I'm out the door. I'm not playing games, and I would handle that second part later. But in my case, I was straight up with him and told him what was going on. I don't really give a shit. At this point in my mind, I had moved on from the other vehicle, pretty much non-drivable. And so, I wasn't expecting to get much for it, so I didn't really care all that much. But we started talking. It was funny because my old car...
This is a call out to all Warren Buffett fans out there. Pay a visit to Intelligent Investment Today, a weekly shortcast dedicated to the teachings of Buffett's tutor and mentor, Benjamin Graham. We explore ideas including the parable of Mr. Market and the margin of safety principle, which have proven vital in Buffett's rise to investment superstardom. So don't delay, check out Intelligent Investment today.
It's 13 years old. It was 2012. And he's like, so do you owe anything on it, man? He went from formal to more informal, trying to be buddy-buddy. Do you owe anything on it? And I just started laughing. I'm like, really? He's like, you'd be surprised at some of the stuff we see. I said, Brian, the car's 13 years old. If I owed money on a 13-year-old car, you would have absolutely no conscience to sell me a new one. And he just started laughing. He's like, you'd be surprised at the stuff we see. All of a sudden, you assume somebody doesn't owe anything, and the next thing you know, they got to pay off on it, and da-da-da-da-da. And it was funny because there were 2 or 3 different dealerships that had asked me the same question, all of which, and all the salespeople knew that my old car was a 2012. So I think that's funny. I think that says something about the state of the economy. Regardless of if you're buying a luxury vehicle or a non-luxury vehicle or whatever, the fact that there's people out there apparently that still have loans on fucking 10-plus-year-old cars is amazing to me. So anyway, he was cool, did the test drive, found one of the 3 cars that I liked. I won't go into too much detail or go too long about each dealership. It was fine. He all of a sudden wanted to take control towards the end, and, I agreed to come inside, take a look at some numbers. He claims he can get me, because it wasn't the exact color combo that I wanted. And of course, he claims that he could get me what I want. Then once he gets me at his desk, he switches up a little bit, and now they're trying to get me to buy the vehicle that's on the lot, obviously, because they want to move the car. It's been there for several months. And, it was just kind of funny from there. And I'm like, look, and I told everybody, my approach to this was, I'm going to be respectful of your time, be respectful of my time. I'm not here to waste your time. I wasn't really an asshole, but I was very nice but firm, and basically let them know, here's what I'm looking to do. Here's when I'm looking to make a decision. I'm not here kicking tires. A decision will be made in the next several days. Let's fucking go if we're going to do this. And, of course, then we start playing the numbers game. Well, ironically, my daughter had a swim lesson that afternoon, and my wife was coming to pick me up because I was going to go to the swim lesson. So we're sitting there talking numbers, and I told him, listen, man, I'm going to have to get going soon. Here's what I want. You can show me the numbers on this vehicle out the door that you have in stock, and I know you want to move that one. That's great. I understand your pricing might not be quite as aggressive on the other ones, but I still want to see these other color combos that we talked about, and I want to see everything side by side. And he reluctantly kind of hemmed and hawed. He didn't really want to do it. We were running out of time. He brings out the numbers on the first vehicle, and I remember at one point I asked him if he had a business card. And he said, yes, I do. Of course, he didn't offer to give it to me because he knew where this was going. He knew he was running out of time. He knew that I was going to be leaving. And that's sort of a, hey, I'm going to think about it. I'll talk to you later type of question if you have a business card. So he doesn't offer to provide it to me, right? So then he goes back to the manager, comes back with some numbers again. I asked him a second time if he had a business card. And I basically told him, can I have it? Because I got to go. And he's like, all right, well, he gave me his card, and he's like, well, my manager is probably going to want to come talk to you, before you leave. And I said, well, unless your manager's coming to swim lessons, buddy, I got to go. And give me your card, work up the numbers that I asked you for, and we'll reconnect on it, So then he sends me a text message later, and he's like, hey, Cashflow King, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for your patience. We're researching the color combos that you had asked about, and we'll get back to you, shortly or something. Well, at this point, that was, Wednesday? Today's Sunday. Still haven't heard a peep from them. Did get a follow-up email from their receptionist and basically told her, like, hey, look, here's where I'm at. Apparently, you guys don't want to do business. I get it. That's fine. Because he could have sent me something else. Hey, we're still working on it. Hey, we got one of them. Hey, whatever. But that pretty much fell apart. The funniest thing was when I got in my wife's car and I saw the sales manager come to the door looking around, trying to find me if it, to see where I was. And I could literally see him from his office. So I'm sitting at this kid's desk, which is out on the floor, and I look kind of diagonally across the showroom, and I can see the sales manager in his office. We made eye contact at one point. And it's like, I know it's a big game, the salesman or saleswoman has to go to the tower and all this bullshit. And I'm like, let's just cut to the chase. You want to talk to me? Like, if he wanted to talk to me, he could have got his ass up and came out beforehand. Hey, what's it going to take to close this deal today? Type of thing. And, whatever, that's fine. So I wasn't going to play games, and they were just sky high in what they wanted. I did find a couple other color combos at some other dealerships in neighboring states. Contacted them separately. I actually got quite a bit of a discount at one of them for pretty much the exact color combo of the vehicle that I wanted, but the price overall was still way more than I wanted to pay. And I'm glad I had swim lessons, not only because it gave me a break and a chance to step away, but also, you don't want to make a decision sort of on the fly. And when I really thought about it and I got home that night, I'm like, man, am I really thinking about spending that much money on a fucking car? Like, that's ridiculous, And so, spoiler alert, I didn't. But that was the first person at the first dealership, right? So that was on Wednesday. And then on the second day, I went and saw 3 different sales reps. So one of them, her card just fell on the floor, but that's okay. I got her name anyway on my notes here. So one of them was actually a guy that I used to play cards with who's still in the car business, and he showed me a couple things, but weren't ultimately what I wanted. His sales manager came out at the end of it, got to meet him, and, anything we can do for you, anything, this, that, or the other thing. And, I told him, man, like, this is not exactly what I'm looking for. Like, I wanted a sedan. It was an SUV. They don't have sedans at that particular dealership, which is crazy to me. Oh, everyone wants an SUV today. Nobody wants a sedan anymore. Well, guess what? I fucking want a sedan. But you know what? He sent me something beforehand that actually was small enough of an SUV. It actually looked interesting. So I liked it. My wife liked it. We're like, all right, we'll go. We're going to go out anyway and shop. We'll go up and see him and see what's going on. So didn't end up doing anything with him. He was super cool about the whole process. We knew each other. I think he ultimately was disappointed, obviously, that we didn't buy from him. But, I'm not going to buy something just to put a couple bucks in somebody's pocket that I don't really want or need. So that was that experience. The next one, we went to another dealership to drive another brand of car, and we met with this guy, Rami. First, actually started off talking to, and I don't know if this is just a coincidence or what, but a couple dealerships I'd gone to, I started off talking to the sales manager only to get passed off to the salesperson. And I don't know if they do that on purpose to try to, size people up first, or so they know what they're dealing with later on the back end or what. But nice kid, at that dealership, and then he passes us off to this guy, Rami. We test drove and went and took a look at a couple other vehicles on their lot. And he was cool. He's been in the car business supposedly for 30-plus years. Older guy, heavy-set guy, sat in the back, really laid back, really cool. Wasn't, drilling with questions. Wasn't, oh, are you going to pay cash or finance? Oh, tell me about your trade. Oh, are you looking to buy today? He didn't seem overly hungry or desperate or anything like that. More of a laid-back, passive salesperson approach, which I liked. And I feel like in general, other than the Brian guy, the other folks that I talked to, with maybe, I'd say it's close to half and half, 1 or 2 exceptions, right? We'll say roughly half of the salespeople were somewhat experienced and have more of a passive approach to this whole thing, which I personally appreciated, And then there were other ones that were a little bit more aggressive, but not overly so, which I can also appreciate being in sales. People say that salespeople love to be sold, and I think that's true. But we love to be sold by good salespeople, not people that suck, Anyway, so we test drove with him. It was fine. He wasn't, high pressure about going back in and getting numbers or whatever. We told him we're driving some other vehicles. I asked him for his card, and I specifically told him, I said, hey, man, if we end up doing something here, I'll make sure that, you get credit for it, because some people don't think about this. But, the last thing you want is you take the time with a customer, you go out with them, you test drive with them, you talk with them, explain the features, answer questions, whatever, and then all of a sudden they go back on your day off, somebody else helps them, and then they end up splitting the sale. Like, I understand how that works, and I think a lot of the salespeople appreciated that. So anyway, he was pretty cool. Didn't end up finding what we wanted or liked there. And then the next place we went, we talked to this girl, Natalie. The only thing she sold was my wife, essentially a new bottle of $200 perfume, apparently, because she had this, it did smell really good, I will say, that she had this perfume on, and they started talking about it. And she's like, everybody asked me that, yada, yada, yada. So I guess my wife's going to end up going and buy that perfume. But it was really, really awesome. Anyway, she had a vehicle that wasn't quite what we wanted. She was cool, though. She let us test drive. She's like, but she was, some bullshit about, hey, you got 15 minutes type of thing. I'm like, how long do I have? Oh, you got 15 minutes. I'm like, well, what do you think? I'm going to take the car for 2 hours? She goes, some people do. So, but she was cool. Didn't, hop in with us, let us kind of take it on our own, do our thing. And, so that was fine. We got back. Actually, when we went in initially, her sales manager came out, was the first one to help us after somebody from the maintenance department was like, do you guys need help? And the sales manager and one or two other guys are sitting back in the tower. They saw us standing at the desk. And I was like, yeah. I was like, if anybody wants to try to sell a car today, I'd love to talk to them. I guess I was kind of an ass after, waiting there for a couple minutes. But anyway, this guy comes out, sets us up with Natalie, and, we went from there. They end up coming out with some numbers. I just wanted to see where they'd be. They gave us some numbers. I was like, all right, fine. And then he says, because, it's like, all right, well, we're going to take this and, basically like, we're not doing this right now. We're just going to, essentially up and leave. He's like, well, he's like, I'm not going to lose the deal over like $200, $500, so ha. I guess what I'm saying is you could get me for another 500. I'm like, this guy fucking sucks. What kind of salesperson says that, or sales manager says that, If you have $500 left in the deal, let's fucking get aggressive, right? And let's come out with it. You know what I mean? So I don't understand some of these people. That put a sour taste in my mouth. The car itself had it was a brand new car. It had a little scratch on the rear passenger side bumper, which I pointed out to Natalie before we drove it, because, I didn't want to be accused of, hey, you guys hit something and, get into that whole mess. I was like, I just want you to see this before we take it out. She's like, oh, I never would have saw that. You got a good eye. Yeah, I sure do. So there was no talk about that, additional discount for that. Like, they thought they were just going to have a layup, and, so anyway, we were out the door on that one. Natalie was cool, but I don't know, not overly aggressive, and a couple salespeople were just like, hey, take it out. And part of me is okay with that, and it's cool they give you your freedom. The other part of me is like, well, it'd be cool if they came along and kind of, had some helpful things to say, but she didn't, and that's fine. So that was the second day. Third day, start with this guy named Chris. In this particular dealership, I was going to simply check a box and drive a car that I had looked at, and it looked okay. I'm thinking to myself, I don't think I'm going to, I don't think I'm going to like this vehicle. I just want to check the box and convince myself that, hey, I drove it, and at least, I looked at one, and now I'm going to go buy something else. Because at that point, I was said I was going to go buy something else, and I didn't. I ended up, spoiler alert, going with the car that I drove with Chris. Now, I went there, and it was kind of funny. I had my shades on. I had my folder with me. I knew exactly the car I wanted to see, and I'm looking at it, and I'm walking around it, and I'm thinking, how long is it going to take for you people to come out and help me? Like, I'm basically a moving fucking target with a folder in my hand. I got my Dunkin' iced coffee in my hand. I'm walking around the vehicle. Somebody come and help me, And these three guys came out, and maybe they weren't, I don't know if they didn't take me seriously or what, and they're all kind of watching me walk around the car. And then finally, Chris starts walking towards me, and I was like, hey, anybody ready to sell a car today or what? And he's, I was like, you selling any cars today or what? He's like, yeah, I hope so. This is like first thing in the morning. And I was like, well, I want to check this one out. And so we start talking, right? And at the end of the day that day, spoiler alert, boom, he sold it to me. So that was kind of cool. But, I was really upfront with him. Hey, here's what I'm looking at. Here's the other car I'm looking at. Want to drive this one. Here's what I'm looking for, blah, 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 blah. I'm not here to waste your time. Like, I'm making a decision, yada, yada, yada. And so he was cool. And actually, while we were on the test drive, we took it on the highway. And I said, this might be kind of a weird request. But, my daughter was taking a nap, and I said, is there any way I can swing this car by the house so my wife can take a look at it? Because she wasn't able to come with me that day. He said, yeah, sure. He's like, I've had a couple of requests like that from customers, So we talked a little bit. Again, really laid back, really cool guy. At one point I asked him, I was like, so are you guys unit-based or gross? And for those that aren't in the car business, I guess you probably wouldn't know what that means, but because I watch way too much YouTube and research way too much stuff, there's some stores like my buddy that works at this one dealership where they're a high volume dealer and they're based on units that they sell. So every time they sell a vehicle, and there's different incentives, but generally speaking, they're going to get a relatively small amount of money based on the units, but then based on how much volume they do over the course of the month, there's going to be volume bonuses and things like that, right? So it doesn't matter how much profit that the dealership makes on that particular transaction, but it more so matters that the car is sold. Now, obviously, they're not going to sell it for a loss, but if he has one customer, if he has two customers, let's say, and they buy the exact same car, let's say they have two of them on the lot, and the dealership makes more money on one and less money on the other, he's going to get the same unit compensation for selling each of those vehicles. It doesn't matter what the dealership made on it, right? That's unit-based. And, I'm sure he has a draw and there's some other comp structure there, but it's more about moving units. Other places, it's more based upon gross or gross profit, meaning that however much the dealership makes on the vehicle, the salesperson earns a commission as a percentage based on the gross profit. So, the more profit that is in the deal and that they can sell it to the consumer for, the more that person's going to make on a particular deal. So you might have two deals side by side. One of them, they're selling them all kinds of, add-on packages at the end and all this bullshit, and they're selling the car above MSRP and all this kind of stuff, and it's just super fucking juicy. That salesperson is going to make a bigger commission on the next one that doesn't buy anything, in the finance office, that negotiates the price down, that, blah, blah, blah. Well, maybe they're just, they're making a lot less money on that vehicle if they're willing to sell that vehicle. So a lot of those guys, and this is the case with Chris, he's gross based, but they also have volume bonuses as well. So yeah, he'd like to sell a car with the most profit for the dealership possible, so he makes the largest commission possible. But at the end of the day, if it's a difference between having a 0 day where he sells 0 cars and selling one car for minimal profit, a lot of times that's called a mini, where you just get like a flat compensation if it's, below a certain threshold, that mini deal, that one unit, even though they're not specifically unit based, they're gross based, that still can count for him towards a bonus at the end of the month for those that work on a gross basis. So, the fact that I know a little bit about the car business and I've been looking at stuff for a while, I've never worked in the car business, but I'm also in financial services as an advisor, obviously. So this type of stuff really interests me and I find it very interesting. And so when I asked him that question, he seemed a little bit caught off guard, but he answered it right away. He said, gross, we're based off gross. And that doesn't necessarily, give me an advantage per se, but I know he's going to try to get some juice in that deal to make as much money as possible. And I understand everybody needs to make a living, but I also know that for those dealerships that typically are gross based, more often than not, there's going to be more room to work within the price. It's kind of like them asking the consumer, hey, are you going to pay cash or are you going to finance this vehicle, right? Because they know if you're going to finance, they have an opportunity not only to make money on the loan and setting up the loan, whether that's through their financial services arm or a third-party bank where they can bump the rate on you or make a flat commission by essentially getting the loan, getting you the loan at that institution. Or, the biggest profit center for a lot of them is when you're back in the finance office with the finance manager and they're selling all kinds of extended warranties and, paint protection bullshit and whatever else. They know they can make more money there. So sometimes they can be more aggressive with their price, knowing that they're likely going to make money off of you on the back end, right? So that's a question a lot of times, at least historically, that salespeople would ask the consumer, hey, you going to pay cash or finance? Because if the consumer is going to pay cash, then they can't pack their payments, right? They can't add these products and bump their payments up and shit like that. They're just, hey, we're going to make what we're going to make, so maybe we can't be as aggressive with our price because they're going to write a check for it, and like that's pretty much all the money we're going to make. So that's a qualifying question a lot of times that dealerships and salespeople will ask the consumer. So on my side, being an educated consumer, asking them, hey, are you guys unit-based or gross? Just very casually in the car, right? We're just test driving together. We're not in the office. I'm not surrounded by a bunch of salespeople. He can't just, go run away. He's stuck in the car with me. We're just having a casual conversation, and I just happen to mention it to him, and then I start talking about this other guy at this other dealership, and, essentially he was telling me about his biggest month and how many cars he sold. And so I'm baiting him just like they're typically going to bait me. Hey, where is he at? How many cars has he sold? Is he unit-based or is he gross-based? How much, negotiating power do I think I'm going to have based on some of his answers to the questions? So you got to be able to play the game sometimes with people just like they oftentimes want to play the game with you as the consumer. But all this takes place as part of a casual conversation, right? And, being very upfront with them that you're there to do business. You're not there fucking around. And we're just going to cut the bullshit out as much as possible. Now, just because you say that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's going to happen. So here's the deal. So I told him, this guy, Chris, I'm like, hey, I'm going here and you can work up some numbers on this car for me. Originally, I was checking the box. It wasn't in the running. I do like it. I'm not going to lie. I'm probably going to make a decision here in the next, day or two. And, so let's get aggressive on this. If it helps you guys out, if you want me to finance with you, I will. If it doesn't make a difference to you, cash is also an option, whatever. And surprisingly, I mentioned that to a lot of salespeople, and they don't seem, at least recently, they don't seem to care whether or not you finance or pay cash, which a lot of places, like I mentioned a minute ago, for the reasons I mentioned a few minutes ago, they want you to finance with them. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Some people, whether they're playing it off like they don't care or they really don't care, I'm not entirely sure, but I mentioned that I would be open to financing with them, in order to get a better price. Now, if I want to pay off the loan immediately or within so many days, that's fine. But I was also asking them questions like, hey, if I were to finance with you guys, how long do I need to keep the loan before you get a chargeback? So let's say they finance me, right? And I get a loan from them, but 15 days later, I pay it off. Well, whatever compensation, flat, sometimes it's called, that, excuse me, that the dealership earns, the bank oftentimes will charge that back to them because the loan didn't stick for a certain period of time, right? In their case, it's 90 days. If I hold the loan for 90 days and then pay it off on day 91, whatever flat they got, they get to keep. The financial services institution isn't going to charge it back, and everybody's good to go. So just asking those questions and letting him know, hey, I understand the game. I work in financial services. Like, let's just make this easy, I think can go a long way. Now, not everybody works in financial services, and even if you don't, that doesn't matter. You can still sort of build rapport with salespeople if you know how to speak the lingo a little bit, understand how their business works, and ask the right questions. I made a joke to him at one point. I said, a mini's a mini. He's like, yep. He's like, I'll just put my name on the board, take the mini, and move on to the next one. I was like, well, you guys get volume bonuses too, right? Not, just in addition to the gross. And he says, yeah. I'm like, okay. So basically, like, if he wasn't going to sell a car that day versus selling a car to me where he doesn't make as much on it, it's still in his best interest to sell that car and, put a notch in his belt, so to speak, and move on. So, so that was all cool. But I told him, look, there's one other vehicle that I'm really interested in. You're pretty much in the final running. I'm going to go to that dealership and, get me some numbers and send them to me. That way there, I'm not trapped. And I legit was doing this. You could even do this if you weren't looking at another vehicle, but I legit was, I did not feel trapped. I didn't end up going back into the dealership because a lot of people will say you never negotiate in person at a dealership. And I have mixed opinions and feelings about that. But, some people only do things over the internet, over email, over phone. And once they agree upon a number and have something in writing, then they'll go into the dealership. The problem or the challenge is that a lot of times people don't necessarily know exactly what they want for a vehicle. They need to go into test drive. They need to go in to do this or that. So my suggestion for anybody out there that might be car shopping, whether you are considering multiple brands or different types of vehicles, and hopefully you are, or not, that you don't, at least on the first dealership, you don't end up going back in to the dealership, especially if you kind of cave under pressure, because a lot of times once they feel like they have you, I forget what the percentage was. I drove several years ago. I was just looking at cars and I went to this dealership and drove a vehicle, and I was just talking to the salesman and he told me that, I forget the percentage, but the high percentage of people go to their dealership, don't shop them out, will buy one of the first cars they drive with them, And essentially, like, consumers are just uneducated people. Now, I feel like more and more, generally speaking, consumers are becoming more and more educated about stuff. But there's a lot of people that just don't care, don't shop. Maybe they have shit credit and they go in there, hey, get me in the first vehicle you can for X number of dollars a month, and fucking pack my payments on me and whatever. So everyone's going to be different with that, but if you can say, hey, look, appreciate it, give me some numbers, I'm going to the next dealership, I got a lot of places I want to visit today, if your numbers work and I decide that this is the vehicle I want, happy to reconnect with you, type of thing. And you go, and you have all the power, right? So that's what I did. Ended up at the next dealership with, I don't remember her name, I didn't get her business card. She kind of, in my opinion, initially seemed like she'd be okay as a salesperson, and then after that, she kind of sucked. She had tattoos everywhere. I'm going to call her Tats Girl, okay? So she comes out, hey, do you need help, blah, 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 blah. Yes, I do. Told her what's going on, shot straight with her, and I told her, here's the situation, whatever. And she's like, all right, cool. Let me scan a copy of your license. And by the way, the other thing I did, which some people were appreciative of and some people thought I was crazy, most of the dealerships asked for a copy of my driver's license. I scanned, or not scanned, but I made color copies of that, printed that out, and brought them with me. There is no reason, in my opinion, that you ever want to give possession of anything that you have to somebody that can take it, walk away, and potentially hold on to it. The last thing you want is you give somebody, and these dealerships may not have done that, but I can't speak for all dealerships, and you hear all kinds of horror stories out there, but sometimes they'll take your license, they'll take it into the dealership, and they might hold on to it, or they might make a copy of it, but they quote-unquote forgot it on the copy machine. But that's okay. We got it in there, let's just go on the test drive, and guess what? When you get back, you still have to go in there to get your license. Why? Because they want to start talking numbers with you. They want to sit you down. They want to feel like all of a sudden they're taking control. You're in their house, so to speak, right? So not to say that everyone's going to do that, but to make it easier, hey, yeah, I got a copy of it right here for you. You can keep that. I made several copies. Why? Because I'm going to several dealerships and I'm going to shop you out. So, don't fuck with me, basically. It essentially says that without saying that. You look like you're an informed consumer, a prepared consumer. You might even catch them off guard a little bit by the fact that you have printed copies of your driver's license. And I think that, that was something that I'm glad that I did ahead of time. Some people, and I almost did this, but not quite, if you're really crazy, I don't know if they can still do this or not, but I've heard of people that have given their driver's license, and this typically happens at like these shady ass, used car lots, buy here, pay here, where they'll take somebody's driver's license and then they'll run a credit app on them without the consumer's permission, which is illegal. They shouldn't be able to do that, but sometimes they will, and it will put a ding on their credit. So if you were going to give a paper, copy of your driver's license to a place like that, you might write on there, and I almost did this, do not run credit, do not pull credit. So there's no fucking, misunderstanding, quote unquote, of the fact that you gave them your license and you wanted them to run a credit app on you. Now, at the first dealership I was with, when I was dealing with Brian, and I was at his computer, I did end up going in, like I mentioned. I looked at his monitor. There was a credit app button on there, and I looked at him. I said, you didn't pull credit, did you? And he's like, no, I can't do that without your social. So I don't know if they absolutely need the social to do it, or if there's a way in certain states to do it with just a driver's license. But just, food for thought for those that are ever car shopping, something to think about. Just be careful that, that doesn't happen to you. And if it does, then I would raise fucking hell about it. So anyway, what was I saying? So the Tats Girl, I had a copy of my license printed out. She scanned the barcode, good to go. I said, how long do I have? She goes, you have as long as you want. I said, great. And I didn't tell her this, but I didn't live very far away. I took the car home, let my wife come out, check it out, sit in it. We had already driven a similar car the day before when we were shopping together. And just to kind of see, what she thought about it. And, then took it back to the dealership. Well, they didn't have the exact options that I wanted. There was one package I thought I wanted in the car, and then after driving that one that had it, I'm like, it really doesn't make a difference for me. So I took it back, and I was like, look, I can probably do without this. What else do you have? Turns out that was the only one on the lot that they had that was available for sale. And so if I said, well, if you guys had to order one, like, what are we looking at? And she's like, well, it's probably going to be April or May by the time it gets here. And she knew I wanted a car in the next couple of days, and it wasn't going to work. And then she just kind of puts her head in the sand. Well, it was nice to meet you. Doesn't like shake my hand or anything. Just kind of mopably walks away. And I'm thinking, okay, she knew she wasn't selling the car to me today. She knew we weren't doing business today. But what a shitty salesperson. Like, why wouldn't you be like, hey, really sorry we can't get that for you, but, I'm going to go ahead and see if there's a way for me to get it sooner. If you end up buying something, just let me know. Love to be a resource for you, do business with you in the future. If you get anybody else, friends or family looking for a car, here's my card. Sorry we couldn't help you today. Maybe we can help somebody in your life that's important to you or something, right? Like, why would you not try to go the extra mile and just put your head in the sand. Oh, it's nice to meet you. It's, kind of like a polite fuck you as you walk away with your head down. No handshake, no business card, no nothing. So she sucked, in my opinion, as a salesperson. I didn't really care for her. Then there was this other guy. So on day 2 in the evening, it was probably about 7:30. I'm on my favorite place. Lisa Foxy, if you're listening, you might want to turn this off. I was in my favorite place, as I like to call the office, on the shitter, and I was taking a look around, and I submitted an inquiry. Dealership, I think, closed at 8 o'clock that night, and I get a phone call while I'm on the shitter by this guy, Glenn. He was super nice. We talked for 20 minutes. I told him what was going on. He wasn't very pushy, super nice to talk to. Ended up going to see him the next day. I had to go up that way anyway, at a bordering town to pick something up. And so we went. He didn't have exactly what I wanted. We did test drive a vehicle there that had, most of what I wanted. The color combo just wasn't right. And they were going to have to order one. And I agreed to come in. I'm like, whatever. Let's see what this guy's got. In the meantime, I already had numbers from Natalie. I was texting back and forth with the first place with Chris. He knew I was shopping. I told him how I drove another car earlier that day, and I loved it. And, they were blowing me up. Their sales managers calling me. Like, you want to almost create, not a feeding frenzy, but like you want them to know, hey, I'm shopping. I like what you have, but I also like what somebody else has. So, like, let's get fucking aggressive and let's go here, And at the same time, the first place is sweating because they know that I'm going to the other dealerships, right? So they know that I'm going to be buying. So they're more inclined to want to do business. And it's, I hate to say it's a big game, but it is a big game, right? So I'm at the dealership with Glenn. He comes out with some numbers, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, so basically, like, that's your number. That's what you're telling me, whatever. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, I guess we're done. And I was expecting to just get up and walk away because I'm not going to, I wasn't willing to pay what they wanted. And he goes, well, all of a sudden his tune changed. And I was surprised because I thought, Glenn was a straight shooter. And he's like, well, where would I need to be? And I told him, I said, well, it's going to have this digit in the front of it to even be in the running. He goes, hold on a second. So he goes back, of course, talks to his sales manager again, comes back out, and he goes, all right, well, here's what I can do for you. I got that number in the front of it, but it's going to be this instead of that. I think it was, instead of all-wheel drive, it was going to be front-wheel drive or something like that. And so I'm like, so this is it, right? This is your final number. He says, yeah. I said, so if I told you I was going to make a decision in the next 3.5 hours, would this number change? He said, no. I said, okay, well, it's not going to work at that number, but if your sales manager changes his mind, you got my number, give me a call. Really nice to meet you, and, hopefully we can work together, but that's just not going to work for me. He was like, okay, shook hands, stood up, walked out, and called the sales manager back at the other place. So, you got to be willing to play the game. Now, I didn't get a call back from Glenn or his manager the entire time. He goes, if you buy the other car, let me know. I said, I will. The last thing you want is somebody that you think is a lead that isn't really a lead anymore because they purchased a car elsewhere. And I get that. If you're in sales, sometimes a no is better than a maybe, because a maybe, people are stringing you along, whether knowingly or unknowingly, and you're not sure where you're at in the deal, and you got to follow up with them, and maybe they already bought something, or maybe they're just busy and they're not calling you back, right? So I told him, I said, I'll let you know. And I actually sent him a really nice email last evening, Friday evening, I can't remember now. But whatever night it was that I bought the car at the other place, I sent him an email, said, hey, really appreciate it. I went to 3 different dealerships for the same brand. The other people were basically a joke. I really enjoyed, getting to know you a little bit. And, sorry we couldn't, do something together. Unfortunately, your manager wasn't able to get aggressive enough on the numbers. But if there's anybody else, that I come across that, needs a car of that brand, I'll be sure to send them your way. I said, I know compliments don't change bank balances, but hopefully you can appreciate that. And maybe we can do something in the future. And he wrote me back, and he was really nice. And, we left off on a good term. That's a good salesperson, because I'm going to remember him, even though I didn't buy a car from him. And if I ever want to buy another one, or I want to go to that brand, he's the first person I'm calling. So that was my experience. So anyway, going back to the thing with Chris. So Chris sends me a text message, and he's like, hey, here's the numbers, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, bullshit. Like, I'm not doing that. In the meantime, his sales manager's calling me, leaving me a message, and I called him back, left him a message. We're playing telephone tag, right? And basically, I negotiated with them everything basically over the phone. At one point, I was in the car, I'm driving. I think I had was it my wife's car at the time? Because my car wasn't drivable. Yeah, it was her car. And I'm on the phone with the sales manager, and, he gives me a number, and I'm like, yeah, that's just not going to work. And he's like, well, where do I need to be? And I gave him a number. And he's like, oh, I can't get there. And he comes back at me $1,000 higher. And I'm like, oh, man. I said, we're so close. I said, so he's hemming and hawing. He's trying to figure out on his side. I said, I'll tell you what. I said, if you want to think about it and call me back, I said, if you can hit that number, I said, I'll be there this afternoon to sign paperwork if you guys want to move this car today. Well, sure enough, 30 minutes later, I get a text back with a screenshot with my number out the door that I wanted. And he said, better to ask for forgiveness than permission, LOL. Here it is, or something like that. And obviously they're still making money on it, and that's fine. They need to, right? But I was like, that's cool. That's fine. I said, I'm on my way. So I go down there, and basically we do everything. It was fine. And then all of a sudden, Chris is like, hey, my finance manager is going to come out, and he's going to want to talk to you about, go over some stuff with you. And I said, listen, man, I said, I know you guys are busy right now, and I don't want to waste his time. I'm not buying anything. And if there's a way for us to just, he's like, so you don't want to do it? I'm like, no, I don't really care about warranties. I don't care about gap insurance. I don't care about any bullshit. I'm not buying. So let's just do us both a favor and save the time, have him go pitch somebody else. And, I'll just sign the forms and we'll be done. And he's like, all right, I'll let him know. So he comes over and introduces himself. And he's like, hey, Chris said that you wanted to read over the paperwork and everything. I've already signed in my spot, so feel free to take your time, read over these forms or whatever, and then I'll come back and we'll just make sure we sign everywhere correctly. And I was like, great, sounds good. Shook his hand. He went to the people next to me, and I can hear him because they have those little glass dividers in the dealership, but I can still hear what's going on over there. And he's pitching him some kind of, I think it was like a $650, I don't know if it was I think it was a tire package or something like that. And, I'm just like, man, some of that stuff might be okay. Some people might want to buy that stuff. But generally speaking, if you're going to buy something at a dealership, from the finance manager, oftentimes they're the highest paid people in the house because they're selling a lot of bullshit. And I'm not saying there's never been a product out there that's good, but, it's just not something that personally I would want to purchase, And by the way, if you're ever curious as to why they're asking you sometimes about your payment or where you want your payment to be, why you never tell them any of that shit, even if you're going to finance, even if you're going to pay cash, you want to focus on, do you like the car or not, and what's the out the door price, but you still want an itemized list of, how they got to that number, because they're just going to try to pack your payment, right? And so if you tell them, hey, I can afford X number of dollars a month, well, if they can bump the payment by $50 over the course of X number of years, and the next thing you know, you're paying a couple $1,000s for some bullshit package you didn't need, that's almost pure profit for the dealership. So you got to watch out for stuff like that. But I was really pleasantly surprised that because I was up front and I wasn't like a dick. I'm just like, look, dude, I'm not going to buy anything from him. Tell him to save his time. If he has to come pitch me and make me sit through it, I'd really rather not, but that's fine. But he's not going to make a dime on the back end on this deal. So we got our number, we're here, appreciate the time. Let's just make this easy. And he was like, cool, I'll let him know. Right. So sometimes I think it pays to have that type of an approach. I don't think the average consumer approaches it that way. Like I said, talking to another sales guy from forever ago, people come into the one dealership, they test drive one or two cars, and then they're back in there signing whatever and getting pitched 6 ways to Sunday. And, a lot of times people get burned that way. So just something to keep in mind. But that was pretty much my experience. So I did buy a new vehicle, and so far very happy with it. My wife's actually out driving it as we speak. She had to run some errands, and our little one's down for a nap, so I'm recording the show for you guys. It was a little longer than I thought it would be, but I appreciate you sticking with me. If anybody has any questions or whatnot, any feedback, as always, realtalkpersonalfinance@gmail.com. Consider becoming premium. And we will see you in the next episode.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.